of the home while still ensuring someone moving in is paying less than 30% of their income towards those housing costs. So they run it essentially in simplest form. They run a calculation to say what can the cost of the home be to ensure the person moving in is paying 30% or less of their total gross income towards housing costs. So that's pre-tax income that we would use for that calculation. And because it's variable, we went and pulled a couple of examples to show you about recent sales in that greater Boston HUD metro area that you all sit in for different ownership units. So for example, in Amesbury, there was a studio for sale for $211,000 and one bedroom in Danvers for $264,000, two bedroom in North Reading, $290,000, and a three bedroom here in Newbury for $330,000. So it's obviously variable depending on the size of the unit. However, I don't know, to me when I look at these numbers, they feel a bit more attainable than the rental numbers do when you look at them and run the math on it. So these numbers are a calculation when if it's a new development, the development is done, and if it's going up for resale, whatever the current market conditions are of the resale of the unit. And so they'll vary slightly from project to project, but that's generally the range that we would see based off what we're looking at right now in the current market.
You're saying they seem more reasonable because it's you're paying a mortgage as opposed to rent?
Yeah, that's kind of my editorializing about seem more reasonable. The reason why I say that is because these numbers, to me, are significantly lower than the market rate would be for a new three-bedroom condo in Newbury, versus the market rate for a three-bedroom rental isn't necessarily too far off sometimes from the affordable rate for a two or three bedroom rental. Where I was showing in the last slide, some of the one-bedroom rents were up to $2,400 for an affordable rate. We see $2,500 for market rate. So the difference isn't quite as large as compared to the home ownership costs that we see in the difference.
You said something about the homeowners, prospective homeowner assets figure into one of the calculations.
Yeah. Yeah.
Run that by me again.
So
'cause I'm looking at the 330.
yeah.
price.
So when you are going through the income validation, when you enter the lottery, and if you are lucky enough to get to purchase the home, you are validated with your income, but you also have a maximum asset limit in order to purchase the home. So if you are doing a ownership unit and you're purchasing, typically we see an asset limit of about $75,000. So you can't hold property elsewhere that's worth more than 75, or have savings over a certain amount. Typically that does not include retirement assets if you have retirement accounts, but it's mostly your liquid assets that you could have today if you were moving into the home, and so there is an asset limit there. And then I think I mentioned earlier, if you then move into the unit and 10 years down the line you sell the unit, you're selling it for an affordable price. So you do get the whatever profit it is, but you don't get to just sell it for what the market's demanding at the time for a three-bedroom unit. You then have to resell it at what the calculated affordable price would be.
Am I allowed to ask questions?
Yeah.
What about for the rental, is there an asset limit?
I don't think so. I should double check on that. I don't think there is an asset limit, but there might be in certain situations. I should look. I'll get an answer for you.
Thank you.
There's certainly a lot of in the weeds for all of this, you know, and I from some experience I've had in my former job in Ipswich, the affordable units that were a part of a larger development, like if you had an apartment building with 120 units or whatever, and a quarter of them were affordable, and there was a management company, there's sort of a built-in infrastructure for like ongoing, just the questions you're asking, like what happens in the next year, like it's sort of the startup involves a fair amount of administration, but as it goes into the future, like if a property, for instance, the Cricket Lane homes, there's an information session tonight if anyone's interested in that, because those are just what the application period is open for those, and the lottery is coming up in November for those three-bedroom homes. But so, and there's a housing authority who's managing all that on behalf of the town, and the developer supporting the developer. So people will buy these new 3-bedroom homes, whatever time period that takes, and say they live there for 3 or 4 years and then they sell it. That's where my question comes in, right? Because like who's then sort of charged with supporting that effort? And I do think in some cases towns have sort of set up more of a housing program where there's actually like a staff member who's the housing coordinator who really helps manage that ongoing responsibility to make sure things stay on the subsidized housing inventory, to assist residents who are like overwhelmed by the process. There was a 1-bedroom apartment that was a condo, one of 3, there was a 3-unit multifamily house. One of the units was affordable, and when that condo unit changed ownership, it was quite a process just to manage getting a new income qualified resident in that property. So it is, I think my point is, there's a lot of pieces to it, but every town has to kind of really figure out a way to support that. There are also a lot of partners who are helping communities, but
it's a lot of
it's a process.
Part one is, well, you really need to do them together, which is good that you're asking these questions at the same time, because one piece of this is the policy and the bylaw amendment, and the other piece is then the implementation of it and the mechanisms to then make sure it's all working successfully.
Yeah.
The mechanisms behind that process is something that I would like to do some deep digging into to get some of these detailed answers for you all, because on the property leasing side and the lottery side is not always my area of expertise, depending on what they're going with it versus the policy side of things. But certainly throughout this process, if we develop a bylaw for Newbury, we're going to want to talk to affordable housing developers and see what the conditions they're seeing, and through that we can also tease out their typical process for going through a lottery and income validation, those pieces.
I think, so in Newbury, the properties that have affordable units are the larger ones, like Oak Ridge and Quaker Hill and Newbury Village. So there's more, there's a property management team, and the town really hasn't been that involved in it. Maybe you can speak to that. But I know it depends on what kind of project it is, I think.
Yeah.
Well, typically on a rental, you have your property management company, whether it's internal to the company or external. So if it's fully integrated into a much larger company, they have what you would call an affordable housing expert that's employed by the company.
Yeah.
Right, so there's a lot of assistance, a lot of support, not only with between that person and that particular deal, but a lot of deals. So
Right.
because there's a lot of deals, there's enough income to support having a person like this. I think you're absolutely right on the for sale side. That's a bit of a long tail, and that 3 to 4 could be a shorter tail, but where is that person, right? Because there's a lot of details. I was thinking as you were talking, you typically would have an attorney for each side, the seller and the buyer. But I don't even know, if that's required by law. It could be somebody going to contract with somebody they know, on a P&S that they pulled offline, and then they pay and then they record, right? So there are, in my opinion, potentially some cracks that people could wiggle through on the for sale side.
Right.
The rental side is pretty safe, and we actually have an affordable housing person that's been with us for a very, very long time and knows
Yeah.
everything.
Expert on us. Yeah.
Yeah, and she'd be happy to come in and for an hour and talk to the intricate details on the rental side.
Right.
Yeah, I think that would be, as part of this process, I think it'll be helpful for us to talk to folks that are working it specifically in that day in and day out. And one of the things we'll mention in a couple slides about the challenges associated with it, to your point about, especially the larger firms have either full in-house property management, or they contract out, or they have staff that know it very well. What we've noticed with smaller developments, which tend to be managed by smaller firms or maybe local developers that are doing 10-unit projects, they might not have the capacity to do as much of that administration, and so sometimes their challenge comes in where they're not an expert in the process and it's so burdensome, never mind the loss of profit in renting an affordable unit, but the actual paperwork involved with it. We've seen folks pull out because they don't want to work through that paperwork as a small-time developer.
It's like the for sale developers that do the smaller, kind of types of, projects. That could be a, 3 to 5 year, depending on sales and demand, and it could be 3 to 5 years before they complete, and up until the time they get pretty far along, they own a board seat, they own control of the condominium association. But once they relinquish control and sell that last unit, you don't see them again.
Yeah.
They're on to, some other town. So if there's
It's the condo association who would be kind of
Yeah.
charged with assuring the restrictions of
yes.
those. Well, I think, and that, again, that's just the present day, that's what we have going on at Cricket Lane off of Pearson Drive. It's 24 single-family properties that will be for sale, but it was a 40B approval, so 6 of those 3-bedroom homes, 3 and 4 bedroom, will be deed restricted with a lottery for the buyer.
With a homeowners association.
With a homeowners association, it's a condo development, yep.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, well,
and they're
I've
being
also
phased
seen-
in related to the market sales and construction, so.
Okay. Well, when you see the homeowners association, the condominium association, I've seen it. I see it down in Florida a lot. Where, they don't meet anymore. Everything's fine, right, until a building collapses, and then they introduce new laws and codes, and then all the engineers come in and determine that there's $20 million of repairs needed, and then the condominium board, we should meet, right, and then all of a sudden it's a disaster, and I think that happens not to that magnitude, but in these small towns, I think that happens very, very often, like a lot, right? That just, there's a board, and everybody pays dues, and then it could be $100, more like $300 or $400 a month, but nobody's watching, right? And nobody's repairing, nobody's fixing, so things get run down until somebody on the board drives through and says, we should probably meet and fix some stuff.
Right, it's
Right.
up to the residents.
Then they look at the reserves and they say, construction pricing is up 35% just in the last 5 years. So there won't be enough, but anyway.
Right.
If you want to go to the next slide here, I just have two more slides here. So we talked earlier about how IZ bylaws and ordinances can take many different shapes depending on the community that you're in. Just want to talk through some of the main components of what usually factors into an IZ bylaw when you're writing the policy itself. So the first thing, or the first kind of two things that you look at is the percentage of the units required to be affordable and the threshold at which the affordability kicks in. So for example, in your MBTA communities overlay district, when we did that work last year, we're requiring 10% of all the units in a development to be designated affordable, and we put the threshold at 10 units or more in a development. So anytime a development is over 10 units, they're required to have 10% of those units be designated as affordable. So those are kind of two first things that you look at. Then you also want to look at what level of affordability you're requiring within those affordable units. So again, for example, in your MBTA Communities Overlay District, you're requiring the units to be set at 80% AMI. Of course, you can also require things to be set at 60% or 30% AMI within the bylaw to have that deeper level of affordability. And we'll talk about in the next slide the pluses and minuses of doing all of that. Those first three bullets, when you look at the percentage of units required to be affordable, the threshold where it kicks in, and the level of affordability required, those also don't need to be static within the bylaw. So going back to your MBTA Communities Overlay District, right now you're saying every project, 10 units or more, 10% affordable housing at 80% AMI. What we are seeing in some communities is they're adapting it depending on the size and density of the development. So they might say for projects of 10 to 50 units, you have to have 10% affordable at 80% AMI. But for projects of 50 to 100 units, you need to have 15% of units affordable, 5% of those need to be at 60% at AMI, and 10% of those are at 80% AMI. So you can kind of mix and match depending on the development size, but all of this needs to be weighted with what, as I'll talk about in the next slide a little bit, is actually feasible for a developer to produce. And the reason we see these tiers sometimes in other bylaws is that as we talk with the development community, what we found is that typically as the scale and density of your project goes up, it makes it a bit more feasible to be including affordable units. So it may be feasible to require the developer to have either a deeper level of affordability or more affordability if you have very large projects. Obviously here in Newbury, we're not often talking about projects of 100 units or more as we might be talking about in other communities, but it's something to consider as we look at the potential ways that we could draft a bylaw in town. Also as a piece of that, those components, we also look at what we call payments in lieu. So some communities will allow developers to make a payment, typically to an affordable housing trust, instead of actually building the affordable unit. And so those payments can take a number of different structures and calculations for what the payment actually is the developer needs to make per unit. But typically, they'll be making a payment that would either be equal to the difference in profit they could make off of an affordable versus market rate unit, or they'll be making a payment that be calculated for the amount that's actually required to build an affordable unit. So the Affordable Housing Trust could get money. The challenges associated with that, of course, is then you need a Affordable Housing Trust to manage those payments and actually spend those payments. We see relatively often communities that have affordable housing trusts and they're collecting fees, but then they don't do anything with the fees. Maybe to no fault of their own because you need a good amount before you can actually take action on them, but that is something that the town then would be managing with a local board for payments in lieu.
I assume a housing authority would fulfill the same function.
Not always. Typically you'll have an independent trust overseeing the actual trust itself.
Okay, and an affordable housing trust would require town meeting action, or is that something the select board could?
Setting up the trust would require town meeting action. The board itself would not need to be approved by town meeting. The board would probably be like the select board or the town manager's office appointing those board members.
And what sort of things? I'm assuming like for Newbury, if we had an affordable housing trust and some money was going in there, we're not going to be in a position anytime during my lifetime to start building affordable housing.
Right.
What sort of things can that money be used for?
So we see things like down payment assistance used for that. So programs where people making a certain income can get, let's say 20 grand towards a down payment in town if they're buying a market rate unit or something. We also will see senior property improvement funds, and so if someone needs to make improvements for accessibility to their home, or if they need to make physical improvements to their home, they could apply to have funds in order to make those capital improvements to their property. Those are the two main things that I've seen those used for. But in some other communities where there's high need for rental assistance, we also see some rental assistance programs. If they have large funds, like during COVID, we saw some of them used for immediate rental assistance for folks that couldn't make rent month over month.
There's one other thing I've seen in addition to those three is if an entity like Habitat for Humanity is kind of putting in a lot of funds, sometimes the town adds a little bit more in to make it possible for an entity like Habitat to do the development.
That's a
Yeah,
great point,
I
yeah.
mean, it just strikes me that particularly for a developer of smaller developments, payment in lieu is gonna be the more attractive,
Even larger ones, it's
Yeah.
always, everyone, unless you, I mean, there are developers out there that do a lot of tax credit work and, you know, it's, you know, it's their life, right? But anybody that wants to, is in this business for profit, it's always payment in lieu.
then they're out of it.
They're out of it.
In terms of, you know, monitoring it.
Yeah, but I've always wondered, like, this housing authorities, this housing trusts, affordable housing trusts, and, you know, you get these funds, payment in lieu, but there's nobody to administrate it, you know, it just kind of sits there. And which is unfortunate. You do need a bit of a stake, you know, in that fund before you can really do anything, because things are so expensive, but, if you're gonna do it, you should probably think through it and create like a roadmap, really from the beginning to the time where you can actually begin to disperse. So,
Yeah, and I would just add that for that reason, we see a lot of communities, I shouldn't say a lot, I'm thinking of a couple that I've seen where the payment in lieu is not an automatic guarantee, where the planning board or whoever the permit granting authority is has to allow it as an option. It's not an automatic option for a developer where the planning board has to oversee that during the permitting process, or trying to make the payments in lieu high enough that the developer wants to instead build the unit because it's not worth it to pay for it, to have it on site. And then I'll add, you know, to the Affordable Housing Trust, one of the challenges in Newbury is right now, correct me if I'm wrong, let's say you pass inclusionary zoning and you have payments in lieu, I think that would be pretty much the only thing funding an affordable housing trust in Newbury would be payments from that payment in lieu, versus other communities that have CPA, for example, Community Preservation Act, they fund their affordable housing trusts through CPA. So you have multiple revenue sources there, which makes it easier to accumulate funds, versus here you'd be, you know, every couple of years, maybe you get a project and you get another, let's say $100,000 in there, it's slow to accumulate and you still have to wait till you spend that money.
yeah, but I think there's other opportunities to, you know, push funds into that trust. It could be, relative to the project, could be building permits,
Yes, certainly.
right?
I'm sorry, what did you say, Scott?
Building permits. So if, you know, and I'm not sure, Martha, maybe you know, but there could be different formulas based on the different types of housing. So if it's a multifamily housing project over 50 units, you could have a different formula on the building permit fee. And then I think provided you have you know, reason for, and it could be, you know, the difference between what a normal fee would be and a increased fee, just that delta would need to go into the trust.
And that would need to be approved by select board or town meeting to allocate a certain building fee into a different fund rather than where they go now.
I can't answer
I
that,
wonder how that would,
but
yeah.
I
Have
would
you
think
ever
that
heard
would
anything
be,
about
That would be a question for Tracy, since I think they go into the general fund now.
Right,
yeah.
so there might be,
I think it's
A discussion about
some
where they go.
low-hanging fruit there, regardless of what the approval is. I don't think there'd be a lot of opposition, unless you were a developer in town, living and had plans on, you know, building something larger.
for the,
For
a
the-
higher
yeah, for
threshold
the higher
fee
threshold, yes.
for, yeah. got
One
it.
last question on the 80-60-30.
Mm-hmm.
Does the, does 40B, just you can either go 25% or 20%, right? On 40B?
No, you could, so That's when you're building a 40B development, you were correct, yes, so if you're doing it under chapter 40B, it's 20 and 25%. But
So
if you're
25% would be moderate, and at 80%, and then if you went less, 20%, it's under, maybe it's a 60%?
I think it is, but I don't know the exact number, but yes. So for 40B, if you're building a development under chapter 40B, you have to have at least 20 or 25% of the units in the development affordable. If you go up to 25%, then the trick is you get to count all of the units in the development as affordable under subsidized housing inventory. Or if it's 20% at, I think 60% AMI, then you get to count all of them towards your subsidized housing.
You mean all the units in the development?
Yeah, so often in this is the weird loophole in state regulation, is that you'll often have communities have 100 units on their subsidized housing inventory saying 100 affordable units, but really only 25 are. But you get to count all 100 in a development.
But that's only for rental units, is that correct?
Correct, yeah.
Yeah, not home ownership.
Yeah, so it'll be different here in Newbury when a lot of yours are ownership, thank you for that.
So that's an incentive to the town to, get over that 10% threshold on the affordable housing, dwellings.
Mhm.
But it's not, it is a little bit of a loophole. But just to your point on the, when we're looking at the, this stuff, it's, we do want developers, right, to be attracted to Newbury. So you just gotta be careful, if it's at, the MBTA, if it's at 10%, gotta be careful about, pushing it to 15,
Mm-hmm.
and then doing, 10% at 80 and 5% at 60. So that's, you don't wanna disincentivize.
Yeah.
I always struggle with that word. Go ahead, Beth.
Just a couple of things. One is there is a proposed legislation for transfer tax fee on real estate transactions over $1 million. And if that passes, that would be a designated source of income for a significant one. And the other thing is, do you see towns, I remember going to the discussion at the community college at that conference a few years ago, and the workshop I went to was really focused on the problem of in lieu as an option, and how that was considered a big problem, because they were saying developers just kept opting for that, as you were saying.
Yeah.
And so do you see any movement towards towns or smaller towns not offering that as an option?
I've seen where communities have put those thresholds higher for the payments in order to disincentivize them a bit more, and like I mentioned earlier, to put in more barriers to getting approval for the payments in lieu, where the developer has to prove to a certain standard the economic feasibility of them building the unit isn't actually there, and that's why they're making the payment in lieu. Whereas I think the issue that was found in some communities was that they had their inclusionary zoning bylaw and they said either build the unit or make a payment in lieu, and they got to choose which option they wanted, and everyone defaulted to payment in lieu. But putting more barriers, so to speak, in front of that payment in lieu is what folks have been trending towards. There's a great report that I just started reading through from our colleagues in Boston that analyzed all the different payment in lieu structures that we are seeing right now across the state, and so I'm hoping to get some more detail about how those have been functioning in the greater Boston area for how they could be set up in Newbury. The next slide, which is really kind of the last slide, talks about some of those challenges that Scott was alluding to before, and things that we really have to be aware of when we talk about IZ, especially here in Newbury and in the Merrimack Valley. So number one, kind of what Scott was just saying, sometimes your affordability requirements can be so burdensome that developers will opt not to build anything at all. And this gets to that economic feasibility that we've talked about a couple times, where if you're requiring a certain level of affordability, the developer is not going to make a profit on those affordable units, and so they have to be able to make enough profit on the market rate units to offset the losses on the affordable unit, essentially. And in some communities, the loss is so great because the requirements for affordable units are so high. Let's say you require 20% of all the units be affordable. The developer's going to say, my project isn't going to pencil out at all, so I'm not going to build anything to begin with. And then you're left with nothing, as opposed to maybe you could have gotten something if your thresholds were a little bit lower. So that is so dependent on the local and regional market, and dependent on the conditions on the ground in towns. And so something in Newbury, for example, and some of the other rural towns, septic, where you don't have sewer in the community, and if a developer needs to build septic, that's a much higher cost. Say they're doing a packaged treatment plant, much higher cost for their development as opposed to if they were doing it in Newburyport and had a sewer system ready to hook up to. So all these little things play into the local market conditions and how much the developer is going to have to pay to actually offset that that profit loss. IZ's feasibility, quote unquote, what I'm referencing right now, can change over time. And so what we are seeing more frequently now is communities building in some type of mechanism to reevaluate their IZ policy at least every couple of years. So maybe 20 years ago, you know, towns like Georgetown and others that were kind of way ahead of the curve and have had IZ for decades, they might have implemented them and it was just kind of a set it and forget it because it was working and it was producing units. Well, the market conditions have changed so much in even just the past 5 years, you know, coming out of COVID and everything, where a policy that was feasible that a community might have passed in 2018 might not be producing units anymore today because of the skyrocketing costs. So a community might say like, oh, we permitted all these in 2019 though, so our IZ policy is working, but if they don't revisit that and say, what are the market conditions today, they could be in trouble where now they're not going to produce any units going forward. So we really encourage communities that this, I mean, all of your zoning should be like this, as Martha and I were kind of just talking about, not resting on your laurels once you actually pass it, but you should be reevaluating it and not thinking that it's a done deal once you finish it, where maybe 2 or 3 years from now we come back and say, okay, what are the market conditions looking at and do we need to propose adjustments to it depending on what we're seeing in town? And that can go both ways. Maybe it gets, market conditions improve for developers and you can require more, or maybe they get worse and you should be requiring less. It's all a fluid mechanism. And then finally, we talked about this already. Go ahead.
One question before you go. So is a mechanism that you would, can you write your bylaw in a pretty static structure and reference regulations that can be changed more easily through public hearings rather than town meeting?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's pretty limiting, and I would want to chat with council about how much you can have in your planning board policies versus the bylaw itself, because the bylaw you would have to say like how much affordability you're requiring. I think in terms of the 10% or 80% AMI, but I think what you could be flexible with, and I want to double check on this, are maybe like the calculations for the payment in lieu. So I see some communities, they just say you need to make a payment and the planning board will determine the payment that's required, and so that I think could change just by your planning board policies. But I think the main components would have to go back to town meeting, and so it is a challenge in towns to do that. And so at the very least, typically the mechanism in some bylaws, you might write in something like, every 2 years the planning board shall report to the select board or shall evaluate the effectiveness and report to the select board or report to town meeting about the effectiveness of the bylaw and recommendations for necessary changes.
Yeah.
But we should check with council or Tracy to see what the threshold is for what we can do.
Right, some kind of reference to market conditions at the time would
Yeah.
be reevaluated at the time you were determining your payment.
Yeah.
Well, I think we should go much deeper, just because there's a lot of opportunity. If you're gonna take a payment in lieu, most municipalities don't look at, they're listening to the developer,
Right.
right? The developer's saying, okay, it's easy
Doesn't
math.
work.
It's
Yeah.
easy math. I mean, we're only getting X number of dollars per month, in rent for this affordable, but it goes deeper because, these 25%, or whatever it is, there's deed restriction and the affordability is held in perpetuity.
Mm-hmm.
So there's money on the backside, and most larger developers, I would say, 90%, aren't in this game to, build it, keep it, maintain it, over 20, 30 years.
Right.
They're typically in it to profit.
I know.
Yeah, right, they'll build it, fill it, and then they'll hold it for a year until renewals, they get past that first renewal period, and then they market it. So, I would just, it's probably, most everybody in this room is smarter than me, but we need a really smart person that can get really under the covers and just try to capture everything.
Yeah.
Because if it's a 10%, savings at the end of the day for a payment in lieu, they're just gonna say, forget about it, right? It has to be a little meaty. But if it's 15%, but I see a lot of the time, and it's never going in. It's developers will tie up the land and start to get things figured out, start to have discussions with, you, and then they ask about the payment in lieu, and then that's always kind of an after. And it, once they start to get traction, and they think, okay, we're gonna get something, done in town. But again, you never wanna leave anything on the table, and I think most municipalities leave a lot on the table.
So on the economics, instead of payment in lieu, what about incentivizing? Say if you're doing a subdivision and your yield plan says you can get 15 units, and you say, if you build, 2 affordable units, we'll give you an additional market rate unit or something like that. Is that enough of an incentive to then build them instead of doing a payment in lieu?
Yes, that's a good incentive, because, when developers are looking at, affordable, deals, they typically, they'll pay a land seller, really, all relative to the density they can get, so, like $60,000 a unit. But the developer only figures $60,000 a unit for those 75%, right? The 25% at zero in their underwriting, and then if everything pencils, it's a deal that they'll pursue. So that incentive is actually a really attractive incentive.
So that might be something to consider, especially if we don't have a mechanism for payment in lieu to build an incentive
Yes,
into the bylaw.
that would be very attractive.
But who, in your example, Martha, who monitors like future sales of the affordable units?
I think that gets back to what we were talking about before, is having some sort of a mechanism for that. And I don't know.
It has to be somebody in town.
It would have to be
Or it could be maybe it could be a consultant on retainer, so, one, maybe 2, maybe 5 years goes by, you don't have one sale, right, on an affordable unit. So do we really wanna have somebody on staff?
I wonder if you could set up, as a requirement, if somebody's doing an IZ project and require that they
You
have a
could.
management company that would be monitoring that. I know Caldwell Farm has a management company that deals with all of their stuff, and maybe that's an added responsibility to ensure.
Well, I think, and that's again back to the reality of Cricket Lane, which is happening right now. Like, that was during the 40B permitting, that was established that Chelmsford Housing Authority would serve this role for the initial lottery, but do you know if there was any discussion of the future?
Yeah, I don't know.
Like, once all 24 of those homes have people in them and 6 of them have income eligible owners based on the lottery, the initial lottery, 5-10 years from now, is it still somehow required for the homeowners association to make sure that Chelmsford Housing Authority assists with overseeing, or like what's the oversight mechanism?
Since that's a Mass MHP approved project, maybe there is some kind of ongoing mechanism that wouldn't necessarily be there for
At the
IZ.
state
What about-
level,
What
yeah.
about 34 Central Street?
Same.
But you could, I think, put, certainly you wanna put the impetus on the board, the condo board, and the responsibility and accountability on that board.
Something in those documents that get recorded,
I think I just mentioned, if you go to the next slide, we already talked about a lot of this, but just as a reminder, since it's so dependent on the local market conditions about how much we could require, Newbury specifically has some good opportunities and some challenges related to inclusionary zoning. Number one, something that, especially I think Kristen, you were talking about, if you're trying to meet septic requirements and Title V requirements here in Newbury, if you need A, the suitable soils, and B, the capital in order to put in the actual septic system required to make it happen. So depending on the size of development you're doing, the septic that you have to put in is going to cost a certain amount of money, and that's going to impact the bottom line there. And depending on where the development is happening, if the soils can't support a certain level of septic system, that's going to impact how many affordable units you're going to get out of the development, because the development might need to be smaller or less bedrooms in order to fit the capacity of the soils for the septic system there. We already mentioned the lack of an affordable housing trust here in Newbury. We mentioned it early on, but the rental price of the affordable units is high, given your location in the greater Boston area. That is a plus and a minus. And I say it's obviously a minus because your folks are paying more money for affordable rentals. The reason why some might consider it a plus is it makes or could make your inclusionary zoning more feasible, because the developer is going to get a higher revenue out of the affordable units as they would in areas that we work in. For example, Boxford, if they're doing an affordable price, it is based off the greater Lawrence area, so they might be getting $400 less a month on the rental unit than they would here in Newbury. So a project that doesn't pencil in Boxford might pencil here because they're getting more in revenue from the affordable units. And then finally, there's strong demand for housing here and everywhere. It's not really particular to Newbury, but there's a strong demand for housing here. So your market rate units are going to fetch a high cost, and that will hopefully help offset the profit loss of the affordable units, versus if you were in a really depressed market, especially maybe if you're in like Central or Western Mass, where there's less of a market for housing, your affordable units or your market rate units might not get as high of a price, which would be harder to offset the profit loss of the affordable units, but you're going to get a pretty high price for the market rate units here in Newbury. That's it. So we want to go through, just to give you an idea of going forward, you can go to the last slide here. Part of what we're doing here today, and I've been taking some notes, are what your initial questions are that you'd like us to go back and do research on and get answers. So things like the actual mechanism once we put a bylaw in place, what are the steps for thinking about payments in lieu. All of those things are feedback that I want for how we can approach this and the research you'd like us to do to get the information for you all. We want to, of course, have time dedicated to get public input on what the public is interested in seeing as a piece of this, and also do some kind of two-way education. What's the public tell us they want, and also how can we talk to the public about how this is structured so they have clarity should you decide to do a bylaw amendment at a future town meeting. They've heard it at least once before about how this all works. We're going to, with all of these factors in mind, kind of analyze what options you might have for IZ here in Newbury. As a piece of this process, we're eventually going to develop sample bylaw amendment language for you all to decide. Like I said, you can go to town meeting whenever you'd like with it, but we want you to have some language there so that you can pick it up and take it to the finish line when that feels most appropriate for town here. And you all will decide as the planning board if and when you'd like to take a proposed bylaw amendment to town meeting. So that's kind of the short and sweet package of what we're looking at here. I want to stop there and get any more comments or questions or things that you'd like us to do some research on and get you answers on. And then the way we'll probably do it going forward is a lot of this communications will probably come through Kristen and the staff here for you all. I'll come to maybe one or two other planning board meetings, but you won't unfortunately see me as often as you did with MBTA communities where I was here every week. But we'll be kind of back and forth and doing those communications as we go along through this process.
Thank you.
If you'd like, my company does have, a subject matter expert.
Yeah.
Has been in this, forever.
Mm-hmm.
I could certainly arrange some time,
Be
an
great.
hour, 90 minutes, just pro bono, and I'd like to actually participate.
Yeah.
Because it's very, very interesting, the weeds.
Mm-hmm.
So just let me know, send me an email if you'd like that.
I will, and that'd be very helpful because we're also, I've been talking with other, like Minco and the other kind of larger local property developers, and so we'll be kind of reaching out to several to get input, and so it'd be very helpful to have the perspective of you all.
Sure.
Thank you.
Great.
But you also reach out to like a nonprofit
Mhm.
developer like Harbor Bites or something?
Certainly, yeah.
All right. thank you, Ian. I know we've
Yes, thank you.
got a few other zoning things, so
Mhm.
we'll.
I'd love to stay, but I
Let you
have to
get
get
on
to my
your
next
way.
stuff, so thank you for having me here today.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Coffee and treats.
Awesome. Do you wanna stop sharing, make sure no one's not listening? Yeah. I think we did that, right?
I've been checking through your.
Yeah, awesome, thanks.
Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Where's your trash?
There's
Like
one
that,
other thing behind.
Oh, right back there.
Actually, there's one right here.
Thank you.
Wait, should I stop on it? Should I not have?
Enjoy the rest of the meeting.
Thanks.
Have a good day.
Yeah,
Thanks
thanks,
a lot,
Ian.
Ian.
I think that video can be like the whole video of our meeting, you know,
Okay, so I'll keep it.
or maybe
Keep recording.
just keep it recording, just in case. Yeah. Is there a way to start again?
Yes, there is.
This meeting is being recorded.
Okay. Thank you, awesome. All right, so, yeah, so we've got our other expert, zoning
Hardly.
planner with us today, and we've got a handout. Do you want me to pass those?
Yeah, let me pass those and we can pass these. Actually,
Few, I saw a few out there.
You know my address?
I haven't been in there every day, but. It's running, where I get.
Corn sugar.
Yeah, we've got one plant left, it's taking forever to ripen.
Really?
I'll give you the handout.
think he's
Okay,
got
do you
that.
want
I'm
us
not
to-
sure.
Is there, are
Pick
there
up
any
some
extra in that pile? Sorry.
Change the slides.
I can't
It's just a one pager.
Ground's too soft,
Okay.
crutches.
I think Kristen plugged in a
Trying to send two reasons to stay on.
I picked out the window of my truck, but
I
yeah,
mean,
that's
is that
it.
Ian's?
Who is, down
I think it was Kristen going to have the presentation next with the zoning.
Pierce Road?
Like a real
No,
zoning, yeah.
I think I'm done.
Yeah,
Okay,
if
thank
there's
you.
anything related.
Side.
Okay, yeah, you just popped up.
Let's go farm down
Very
there.
nice.
Actually, I'm gonna do a lot of
I'm so glad.
That's the best. Yeah, we did it.
Thank you guys.
You were- That was you?
It's really good, right? Yeah.
And
That felt good.
Oh, you down
this
there?
thing
I took a ride down
tonight,
there, you know, and,
I'm gonna share, it's an opportunity for somebody who might be
So that's a-
interested
that's a nice
to
track.
have first exposure to it, or is it being actually?
It's a Beta, the orange one?
No, it's just an info
Okay.
session.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's the
there'll
bail.
be some kind of presentation and then a chance to ask
So we were
questions.
bailing.
Okay, I'm gonna.
We went through, we were bailing.
Yeah, I know.
yeah,
I
I'd,
hope there's a good turnout, but publicity was so weak that,
drive that tractor all day long.
Yeah,
but it'll,
Yeah.
we'll
No,
record it.
we have an orange one I had with,
I'll be learning a lot.
rig. Green one we bail with, it's. good for
Thank
the-
you.
get the whole
Thanks,
stuff.
Pam.
Good- Have a good day.
Thanks
Have a
for
good
the
night.
bagels.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thanks, Pam.
Did you get one of these?
Thanks, I guess I could
We
use
just
it.
got another one of those, it's a little older, but we're using that closer too. They're nineties, late nineties tractors.
I'm looking for,
Get pot for one of these, did you have?
no, I wanna buy one of those, you know, the John Deere little, they can put a little plow on it.
Yeah.
What do they call it? It's really small,
The compacts, I'm not sure what they call them, but
yeah,
There's
there's
a
a
few of them
name,
around.
there's a name, they're expensive. But you can put a little plow and you can actually, if you get the right one, it's enclosed, it's got heat.
yeah, heat, AC,
Yeah.
they're little compacts, they're,
Yeah, and they're four-wheel drive, they can either be diesel or gas.
Yep.
You know, pushing 2 feet of snow with that.
and they're hydro, I think, too, so you don't, you know, you're not shifting all these gears and doing all this crazy stuff. Four-wheel drive.
Yeah, it's definitely automatic.
There's a couple of them in town. There was up by the Human Road has one.
Oh, yeah, I see his up near the front, he keeps it parked up there.
Yeah. for a little homestead,
No, do what you
Little
need.
home.
I don't even.
you know, leaf removal or whatever. Not too bad.
No,
You're not gonna,
I'd like to have a little mini excavator on tracks too.
yeah.
But everybody said, why? I said, I don't know, I just like
Yeah.
running that stuff.
Did you travel somewhere recently?
Not real recently.
But if it goes, and those things can get up to 25 miles an hour.
As long as the planes are flying.
So, if it's registered,
Oh, right.
On the 20th.
Yeah.
you can take that, you can't take it to Palms,
Yeah.
this is the speed limit.
Are you
Where I live.
seeing your
But Newburyport's all
sisters,
25 miles an hour.
friends?
Yeah,
max.
we're gonna be out there.
So you can take that downtown, you know, Cub stop that right.
We drive everywhere but on the highway. So.
You what?
We drive everywhere but on the highway.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, so you and Tender Crow.
Fall under the farm plate, so.
How much time do people have? You know, we started about 15 minutes late, but I think we might go past 10:30 if that is okay for
Do we get paid overtime?
people.
You get an extra bagel.
Larry's here right now.
Extra
He didn't
bagel.
What's
make
time and a
sense,
half to zero anyway?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, no.
I think it's still zero.
I have till
I think that's the only math equation, it's
10:50.
still zero, right?
So, half an hour.
About half an hour.
Whatever we need to do,
You know,
it's raining.
Yeah, it's your day off, right?
The rain dance.
Yeah, I didn't even get to sleep in.
celebration. I don't know if that means any priority.
All right.
All right.
Okay, should I put this up on the screen?
Either way, I mean, everybody's got it.
is there anybody,
There's-
Nobody's on
There's
the
nobody
screen,
on, so
so I
it
don't
would
think
only
you
be,
need to.
yeah, okay, good.
Yeah, that's fine.
So the other thing we wanted to talk about today is kind of where we are with the recodification project, phase 2 of that, and also go over a couple of other potential things for the board's consideration for moving forward for annual town meeting of 26 or even as far out as 27. So I handed out a list, and I hope it's not too much in the weeds. It's a lot of little picky stuff. But as you recall, last year we probably got through about half of the recodification recommendations that Lisa had given us, primarily because we also needed to focus on the ADU bylaw and the update of the flood hazard bylaw. So that took a fair amount of time and effort to get through those, and there were a few of the articles that we just decided that we would defer until this year. So if you recall, we did a pretty thorough rewrite of Article 1 general provisions, so that's all set. We don't need to do anything further with that for this coming town meeting or going forward unless something changes. So that was tied back to Mass General Law language. Article 2, use districts, that was one that we did not address. We do need to add some language regarding the MBTA Communities Multifamily Overlay District. That didn't get plugged into that particular article. And Lisa had also recommended language for a new section on interpretation of district boundaries. So we'll be bringing, I'm in the process right now. We've been working with a kind of a working draft with a lot of comments and red lines and deletions, and I'm updating that to kind of create a master draft, which will be formatted as if it were going to town meeting with the bold underline, the strike throughs and all of that. So we've been meeting with Lisa, off and on over the last few months. We'll be meeting with her again next Thursday. And our hope at that point is to get through all of the remaining questions we have on the different articles. We've gotten up through Article 6, the table of use dimensional regulations, and we have a few more to go, and then to be able to bring that prepared draft to you all for discussion. But moving forward, Article 3, regulation of use districts, there was language in there that was specifically related to select board as permit granting authority for special permits in agricultural, residential, and some other districts. That's been deleted to coordinate with the new language we have on special permits in Article 5. A big one, and I probably should have put an asterisk next to this one, is reviewing and amending the table of use regulations and the bodies that are designated as special permit granting authorities. So this is an effort that we have not started yet, but needs to be done, and my hope is that we would maybe have a working session just on that. I think it's
Do you think a smaller working group could be good if there's 1 or 2 board members who are able to join that with potentially the chair of the ZBA?
Yeah, I think that would be helpful. I think perhaps a select board member might want to be involved in that discussion as well, and Peter Bennett could be helpful. So I think that would be a good way to deal with it, as kind of a working group, and then bring it back to the full board for some recommendations.
So we'd probably need to start that pretty soon.
I would think so, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I have pulled out table of use regulations from other communities, and I'm starting to look at those versus what we have to see, if there are things that we don't have that we should, or, things that we have that no longer make sense or need to be clarified. But I think that would be a great idea to have a workshop.
Do you think that would be like a one-time meeting working group, and then bringing it back to the full board?
I think it might actually, we could try it, but I can't.
Yeah.
I think it might,
Okay.
we might need more than one.
Okay.
The next one in Article 4, the regulations of overlay districts. Again, we need to add language regarding the multifamily overlay district, which we didn't include last time. There are some outdated references that need to be corrected. The water supply protection, I think, probably also needs a deeper dive in terms of allowed uses, prohibited uses, and uses allowed by special permit, just to make sure that they still make sense. And there are a whole bunch of CMR references, which Lisa, Town Council, is checking for us. There are some tweaks that need to be made to the Plum Island Overlay District, small one, just adding the adoption date of the PIOD, since it references date of adoption, but it didn't actually have the date in there. We need to clarify language regarding special permits and findings, and when we discuss this with Town Council, that's probably a discussion to have also with the chair of the ZBA, since they're the ones who deal with these. And there is a provision in there regarding use variances, which are actually not allowed, so she's recommended that we strike that. And then in the adult entertainment district, if you recall, the last time we started to, we had talked about moving definitions out of Article 11, which is administration, into district-specific or use-specific areas. Right now, we kind of have a mix and match, and we didn't move the definitions for adult entertainment last year, so we're going to do that this year. And we're also going to just chase through the buffer zones and make sure that everything still actually meets the requirements.
Excuse me, Martha?
Yes.
If I may, regarding the PIOD,
Yes.
do you anticipate whether any changes might be needed because of the ADU?
We flagged that as a question, and I'm actually not totally clear yet on the answer, so I would like to talk with council more about that.
I know it's becoming something of an issue in the island. At least one of my neighbors is, exploring ADUs with Peter, but so it's something that people are aware of. but they may not be aware of how it affects the PIOD, so.
Right, right. Right, because I think the limitations on FAR and lot coverage and number of bedrooms all still apply, so.
Mhm.
But yes, thank you for that question.
Yeah, Martha, what's the issue with the variances? Use variances?
There's language in there basically saying that use variances can be granted upon a finding by the ZBA. We actually do not allow use variances in our bylaw, so it was an incorrect.
Well, if it's in the PIOD, then it's allowed in the PIOD, isn't it?
The way it's worded, I think it was actually intended to be special permits, not variances from
Well, the
our
whole
discussions with
PIOD,
Lisa.
the terminology, I find very confusing.
There's a lot.
Like, it doesn't, I think you point out, it doesn't make a distinction between a finding and a
Right.
in a special permit.
Right, and we talked about that with Lisa at our last meeting, and just trying to clarify that, because a lot of things that call for findings really should be special permits. And then they may need to make certain findings in order to grant that special permit, but
Right, that's, I've always found it very confusing.
it is very confusing. Excuse me. Any other questions about that section? Under.
Oh, yeah, actually, there's been a lot of discussion about the definition of building heights that the ZBA has struggled with. Is that settled? Did we resolve that last time?
We rewrote the definition. I don't know whether anything has come before the ZBA that, now has to refer to that definition. Have been there any?
No, they don't, no, is the short answer to your question, that I can recall.
But I think, we rewrote the definition in a way that the building commissioner thought was appropriate. So that's what's in
So
there.
far so good then, I guess.
So far, so good. So actually, if if you're aware of any discussions that come up on any of the ZBA applications where they're still struggling with it, it would be good to know that. And we can check with Eric when we.
And
meet with
making
him.
sure they have the new bylaw.
Right.
Because it's not on E-code yet, which is something I've been just kind of waiting for, but it's a process. I mean, the Attorney General approved all the changes from town meeting related to definitions and almost everything else. There was one small thing, but whether the people who have been working with the bylaw for a long time are aware of all the changes or not is, in practice, is
But I think the
sometimes a
MBTA
question.
bylaw is up there now. I believe.
On E-code, yeah,
Yeah, because that was last year.
that was like a year and a half ago.
Oh, was it?
That was approved,
Okay.
yeah.
Time flies.
Seems like it was yesterday.
I know,
It does.
yeah.
But, our discussions about ADUs kind of, harken back to that. But
Yeah.
that's actually been on the books for over a year now.
Is the building height definition, so we received, counsel from Peter Bennett.
Mhm.
Is that, just interested, did he just go back to the IBC, National Building Code? It just seems like that it's easy, right? I mean, you've got a building code definition of building height, and then the town just has to say 35 feet or 38 feet, whatever they want. I'm just interested in this.
Yeah, it's not exactly that. We did do that for the definition of structure. That just seemed to be the cleanest way to do it. Our definition for building height is still mean grade to mean height of roof, but we clarified that that's, the roof with the highest eave. I think part of the discussion issues that ZBA has had is how do you deal with roof decks and that kind of things. So I think Peter was probably referencing the IBC more than.
Probably. Sorry.
No, that's okay, it's a good question. So So Article 5, special permits, as you recall, last town meeting, we added a whole section about general special permits that aren't related to a specific use. So that part of it's all set. Wind energy, council has pointed out that the noise criteria, I think, don't match the state's requirements, so that needs to be revised. And this is another section where we need to move the specific, use-specific definitions from Article 11 into this section so we can be consistent throughout. The next one is a biggie. So based on a recent court case, I think it's the Tracer Lane case, town council has advised that we cannot, in fact, require a special permit for large-scale ground-mounted solar installations. Right now, the way it's structured is that it's site plan review for anything that's, I think, 1/4 of an acre to 2 acres, nothing below that, and then 2 acres and above, we require a special permit. But according to...
Can you say that again? I'm sorry.
That's okay. So right now, our bylaw requires no special permitting or discretionary permitting for anything that's under 1/4 of an acre. For a ground-mounted installation that's between 1/4 of an acre and 2 acres, we require site plan review. And then a ground-mounted solar installation that's greater than 2 acres, 2 acres or greater, we require a special permit. According to the recent court case, it is a protected use and it needs to be allowed by right, but can be subject to site plan review throughout the town.
So it would no longer fall under a special?
No longer follow under a special permit. So Lisa has reworked our special permit language to turn it into site plan review language. It's kind of combining the two site plan review and special permit language sections that we had in that bylaw. There would be an opportunity, and this is one of the things I wanted to discuss with the board. We could potentially, if we can find land area large enough, create an overlay district where it would be allowed by right, subject to site plan review, and then special permit would be required after that, or outside of that. But
I'm confused, I'm not, doesn't that contradict the by right aspect?
so if we can create an area large enough where it's allowed by right, that would be acceptable, and you know, the state would consider we're honoring the fact that it's a protected use. We could, outside of that, if there were areas where we really felt that a special permit was required, we could do that, but we would have to be very careful.
So then the court finding that it's an as of right use is based on state regulation rather than state statute then?
Well, it's a 40A section 3, so.
Okay.
But
Isn't that MBTA communities? Oh, that's section 3A.
That's 3A, yeah.
Oh, okay. And would there be, are we talking, what would be the threshold for a level 1 rather than a level 2 site plan review? The same as it's in there now?
I would think that probably all of this would be, fall under level 2. So that's a question for the board, whether there would be any interest in seeing if we can create an area large enough that would be only site plan review.
How large of an area?
That's not quite clear
Okay.
at the moment.
3 acres?
3 acres would not be enough. We could include the areas where we already have existing or permitted solar. So that would be the landfill, the Middle Road, the Vashon property, and the USAIR property. But it would have to go beyond that.
So it wouldn't have to be a contiguous area?
Don't think it would have to be a contiguous area. But we could also, just kind of set that aside and rewrite the bylaw as site plan review for now and consider, consider an overlay district in the future.
Well, so if it wasn't contiguous, it would be, pieces, right, combined would
Combined.
be, over that threshold.
You know,
It couldn't just be the existing sites, because we'd have to have areas that don't have currently.
Right, but we might want to think about areas that are already developed for other purposes. You know, there might be some areas along Route 1, for example, that are not heavily built on or something like that. And even if it's an overlay district, just like the MBTA, it doesn't matter if it's developed or not.
Yep.
But there could be some parcels there. I don't know. I think we would have to look at it. Perhaps MVPC could help us, do some mapping to figure out with some LTA time or something, what areas might be useful and whether it seems that they would be large enough to meet the requirements of the law.
Do you remember what the law says related to?
I'd have to go
We
back
have to
and
look at
look at
councils.
Bruce's, the Tracer Lane decision.
And now I know why it's in bold.
Yeah.
Martha, can I bring you back to wind energy?
Yes, of course.
I know you mentioned noise. Is there any consideration about lighting effects of flicker as an issue? I recall back by the traffic circle, when that turbine was put up, the residents on the hill were quite displeased at the time about the flicker they got from the red light that was mandated by FAA or whatever it was.
Right.
And they were pulling the blinds tight all night long. So anyway, that's the context in which I asked whether anything about lighting and flickering.
We haven't talked about that. There are some provisions in there about flicker, but I honestly don't remember what they are. Nothing had sort of jumped out as a flag that we should address that, but we can certainly take a look.
Right, consider, please.
Sure. The only other thing on the solar is council has also recommended that we review the financial surety provision, because if it's a solar installation on private property as opposed to town-owned property, it might not really make sense because it's not a town, potential town liability issue.
Yeah, how does this impact, like roof-mounted solar?
Roof-mounted is exempt anyway. This is only ground-mounted solar.
Okay.
So I think roof-mounted just requires a building permit from the building commissioner. So any thoughts on that? Any interest in seeing if we can create an area that would be sufficiently large? Or should we leave that for another time?
I don't know if he'd take some brainstorming and whatnot, but if we had an area, then it would still fall under special permit. We said we'd have to be careful, but, right?
Yeah,
So everything outside?
everything outside the area.
The overlay
right,
district.
Right, so the overlay would allow it by right, the site plan review, yeah. But we can discuss this further with town council, see if we can get clarification on size of the area.
Yeah, it'd be
I think
nice
it's
to know how
Yeah,
big it
I
is.
think that would be the driver.
Okay, yeah, I think it's some percentage of area in the town, and then for us, it gets to be a question of, well, is it a percentage of developable area? Because, a third of us, is marsh, which is undevelopable, and things like that, so I think there are.
If you start looking at specific areas, then people are going to start to think that someone's going to put a solar farm up
Yes, that's.
next to them,
Right. And, for certain areas, there might be other, other considerations, wetlands or whatever, that would still shape whatever happened, but we'll look at it a little further and come back and make some recommendations.
Yeah, but I mean, if you could get enough area, you know, just using the parcels where there currently are solar projects, then, like you said, like the landfill or whatever, that might be an easy route, you know, an easy explanation for town meeting.
Right, right. Yeah, the question is whether they would be big enough.
Yeah, I was thinking the landfill would be perfect, you know, if it had capacity to, you know, go big.
Yeah, I mean, I think the one that's proposed there now, I can't remember how many acres it is, but it's not, you know, it's not huge. It would not be enough itself to,
How many acres around, do you think?
we'll try to get some clarification on that. And see if it makes sense.
It'd be interesting to see when they start solar,
When they what?
when they start building that, it's been permitted, so,
Yeah, the landfill,
yeah.
yeah.
Well, I do think we're beginning to see a lot of just significant drop off on roof mounted solar, just because of the incentives that are, you know, going away.
Right, and that could impact the industry as a whole.
Yeah.
So it's hard to know. Okay, moving on, Article 6, dimensional regulations. There are some minor clarifications, nothing major that needs to be done there. Article 7, I'll come back to that. I've moved that under B. Signs, again, some relatively minor. There's language referencing agricultural signs, so we're going to plug some language in there that we already have that's not in the bylaw. There has been a suggestion to prohibit LED signs, and town council said we can certainly add a provision prohibiting those if the board would like to do that.
Why call out LED signs? as
Because they
opposed
tend to be very, you know, very, very bright.
I mean,
They're also-
remind me, I don't know. do we-
They are.
I have a question. Is it possible to, like, how you can, like, tell a developer, like, who submits like a lighting plan, how many like lumens or however you measure light, like, can you put something like that, like you can have an LED sign, but it can't be this bright. Something like that.
Probably.
It should.
What-
I mean,
Yeah, I
LED
don't
lights
think- 'cause
are more
LED is-
efficient than
is
other
good.
things.
They are more efficient.
We don't want to
This is-
discourage.
Kind of,
They just denied a LED sign at Rich Joe's in Raleigh.
Oh, did they?
What's the agricultural signs?
It's some language regarding, as I recall, some language regarding off-premise agricultural signs.
Store.
So we've got that language, but it's separate from the bylaw, and the bylaw refers to it, so it was felt that it made sense just to
Put them together.
put them together.
Okay, so nothing, no real changes, just
No,
to put them so it's cleaner.
yeah, yeah. People don't have to go searching.
Yeah, the LED Raleigh, I think it was because it was in the historic district, but they wouldn't allow them to change that sign to LED.
Is it lit now?
It's a lit sign, you know, plastic face, see-through lit sign. With the gas prices, that you could use the pole numbers,
Yeah.
and they wanted to put a digital number, so you just change the price of gas with the remote. They wouldn't allow them to do it.
I mean, I kind of would echo Sadie's comment, which is, it seems like there's a different way than blanket prohibition of a certain technology, because I feel like technologies are always changing. Like, we don't know what future LEDs may not be as bright as like current LEDs. I don't know, right? So the concern is the extension of light into the surrounding So maybe there's a different way
Yeah,
to,
there's gotta be a way with it.
yeah, to have limitations that
The
aren't
intensity of
blanket.
I mean, even you can go to Home Depot and you can get a daylight LED bulb, or you get a
There's
soft
so
light
many different
LED bulb.
ones,
but-
yeah.
Right, I mean, for example, we're calling for 3,000 K for color temperature to keep it warmer as opposed to the blue lights and things like that. This is-
Since you mentioned that, can you help me out? I don't understand any of that. What's color temperature?
So that's basically the warmth. So if you have something that's, say, 2,500 or 3,000 K, that's pretty warm, sort of a yellowish light. If you
We're not
need something
talking
that's-
warm to the
Not
touch.
this.
Not to the touch, just
Just
color.
like the
Oh,
color.
okay, all
Right.
right.
Like a lot of your old incandescent bulbs were, you know, pretty warm color-wise.
Like yellowy versus blue.
Right,
Okay.
That's how I
But
have
like-
thought of your question.
right, but a lot
What
of
does warm mean?
the newer headlights, for example, and a lot of the LED lights
They're
are,
awful.
you know, 5,000, and they have very blue, intense
Yeah.
light.
I've seen that on the road.
Yeah, and then there's kind of a daylight in between.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's it.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's not
Now I
not
get it.
touch.
So the blue you want in your garage, right, to get you busy,
Right.
right?
Yeah,
And the yellow you want in your family room to
Yeah.
watch.
right.
Right,
Okay.
right. But, I mean, the thing about the LED signs actually did come from somebody on the historical commission, so I think it would be worth, you know, taking a look at other ways of maybe addressing it as opposed to a prohibition. I'm no lighting expert, so or sign expert, so we probably need to get some guidance on that.
Sounds like Sadie's our new lighting expert.
It's all yours.
I don't
She has a
know.
nice lamp in her office.
Exactly. Yeah.
like lamps
Thinking
and
about it, warm versus cold.
All right.
Especially starting,
Right.
whoops.
Throw my 2 cents in, it's maybe apocryphal, but I heard that LED lights on traffic lights, stop, go, yellow, caution, they're so efficient that they don't generate much heat. And in our cold New England climates, when you have a snowstorm, the snow can actually accumulate in front, on the lenses, if you will.
Oh, no kidding.
So you can't see as well as you might.
Well, I think with the newer cars with the LED lights, they actually have to heat them for that reason, so that the headlights don't freeze over.
So you're using more energy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
You say, you know, one,
There's no
using more.
Unintended consequences.
Right.
Or just like during a rainstorm, having your lights come on in your car, and it takes energy to power up the lights while you're just driving down the road in the rain. Anyway,
Sadie, you
I
gotta
digress.
give us a report on that.
All right, so we'll.
Color temperature and physical temperature.
Article 9, special regulations, right now that just has our site plan review. If we are going with full site plan review for solar, we probably want to be moving it into this section. We've talked about the possibility of creating a separate section that deals with all of our sort of alternative energy things, because they're kind of scattered around right now, but haven't quite figured out how to address that yet. Article 10, general regulations, there was some language that town council had recommended regarding non-conforming uses and structures, and pre-existing non-conforming lots with non-conforming structures. We do need to make one small amendment to the ADU bylaw based on the Attorney General's review, as we're prohibiting ADUs on lots with basically multifamily dwellings, and we can't, we have to allow it on the same lot as any type of principal dwelling, so that language needs to be clarified. And then Article 11, administration, as noted before, we're going to be moving definitions into their respective parts. Thanks, Scott.
Thank you.
So those are the things that are all kind of related to the recodification project. In addition, in going through the bylaw, and there are a number of things that have been sort of on my mind for a while. The first of which is making some changes to zoning districts where they overlap parcels. back in 2011, 2012, 2013, we went through an exercise of creating the business and light industrial district, clarifying the Byfield business district, and some other areas where we made the district boundaries coterminous with parcel boundaries, so you didn't have parcels that are falling within two different zoning districts. I'm not sure that we can address all of them right now, and there's some pretty convoluted district boundary descriptions, but the maps that I gave you are excerpts from my map, and I wanted to go over the ones that I think may be worth taking a look at. So first are two in Byfield. The top map you have shows the, other than the residential agricultural, which is all yellow, the three zoning districts in Byfield. So we've got the commercial highway, which is on both sides of 95, the Byfield Village Business District, and the commercial highway A, which is here, and light industrial Byfield. So the next sheet is the commercial highway section, which is on the other side. It's on the west side of 95. And I know you guys have been dealing with it with the application for 15 Central Street. But the district description for this part of the commercial highway goes from the intersection with 95 down to the intersection of Church Street, and then I think 223 or 225 feet back from Central Street. And the overlap onto 15 Central is potentially a little problematic. I'm not quite sure how that's being dealt with for the application, the subdivision application. But the fact that parcel 54 on map U11 is also only partially within the commercial highway district sort of limits development on that parcel. That was created way before my time, so I'm not quite sure why that limitation was set. But my question is whether there would be any interest in just cleaning this up and getting commercial highway out of parcel 53 or 15 Central and just making all of 17 Central part of the commercial highway district.
Seems reasonable enough, because it's a large chunk
It is.
out behind the gas station there that they cleared it, I don't know, quite a few years from now, but I heard a rumor of McDonald's there many years ago. Not that obviously that happened.
McDonald's, is that?
Behind the gas station, yeah.
How did they access it?
I don't know. There was a rumor I heard years ago that they would, when it got cleared, they were thinking of a McDonald's, but nothing ever happened.
Yeah, they also came before us at one point. They wanted to put in a donut shop in a separate structure, but they couldn't. That would have meant two primary structures on the lot, which isn't allowed.
A what shop?
A donut shop.
Dunkin's?
Not Dunkin's. It was going to be something else.
Doesn't
A boutique donut shop.
So would you also clean up the section on parcel 47 too?
I would think so.
I wonder, just wondering out loud, if maybe at some point that was defined by boundary lines.
That's certainly a weird,
Yeah, otherwise it's hard to see why
why I would ever have.
you shape like that.
Yeah, I think a lot of the zoning districts along Route 1, that was also set by 500-foot offset on one side and 1,000-foot offset on the other side. So I think they were doing, because commercial highway on the other side where Pearson Plaza was also an offset at one point, and we changed that to incorporate full parcels. So, the only question is, are there any unintended consequences by cleaning this up? But it seems to make sense to do that.
What's behind, you can't tell from this zone map, but parcel U1148, is that residential?
That's residential,
I mean,
Access from Downfall Road.
from down, yeah,
You
downfall.
can see a little bit on the big map, just those little lots off of Johnson Lane.
oh, yeah.
And I can't picture what the building is on U11 or 47 either, but
Yeah, that's a weird one.
I don't recall anything being there.
Yeah,
Doesn't
it
look
actually
like
looks,
there's frontage, really.
yeah, it looks like that's a landlocked lot.
Although not on this map. Got something weird.
Isn't that a little tiny?
Right there.
Yeah, but that's like part of this lot.
And
Oh,
see,
it's not over.
I don't know,
looks like a driveway.
weird.
It says 8.
Is that state owned? It must be the state.
So,
Anyway,
i-
okay.
if you, let's assume you did that, and, you know, you just pulled back that district, to just include, parcel 54,
54.
would that be spot zoning?
I don't think so because it's part of a bigger district. We've got commercial highway district on the east side, and we also have commercial highway district on Scotland Road.
I wonder if it goes back, again, that, you know, it's getting late. Just thinking out loud, I wonder if it maybe that this was created somehow separated by the Route 95 construction, if it goes back that far.
Hmm.
No, it's just
Yeah, might
thinking
have,
out loud.
might have
It
been.
doesn't matter at this point.
but, you know,
The only thing I can see is you moving the commercial district to abut up to some residential uses on Johnson Lane.
right. Which it does on the other side, it butts up against, you know, residential districts on Fruit Street. And
Yeah.
so, and we don't, I mean, today, what I'd really like to do is just sort of get a sense from the board if it's something that you think is worth pursuing, and if so, then we can, you know, we can kind of go through the exercise of seeing if there's any downside, but at least move forward with
Well,
investigating it.
certainly taking 53 and was it 47?
47.
Out of the district would be worthwhile. I think we need further discussion as to whether or not we want to extend it to the entire parcel of 54.
Yeah, I mean, right now, as it stands, it's residential agricultural, it really can't be used, because you can't go through the commercial to, so, but there may be some reason, there might be some reason not to do it. Okay. And then the next one is the Commercial Highway A District, which is where we are right now. And the description in our bylaw, basically, it's a 500-foot swath from, to the west of 95 down to the river. This representation on the map, I took some dimensions, and this representation on the zoning map doesn't match that at all. It's crossing boundary parcels, or parcel boundaries. So it seems like, again, it would make sense to clean this up and make it coterminous with at least some parcels. If you're looking at this, you know, 2A is where 12 Kent Lane is, that's where we are. Immediately to the left of that, 7 is a residential parcel. 19A is the parcel that's owned by the town, which was originally acquired ideally for recreational purposes. Then there's a little parcel owned by the Commonwealth. There's on the north of Kent Way, there's a residential parcel, and then there's the dentist. And the corner of Kent Way and Central Street is private residential.
That's where the dinosaurs are.
That's on the other, on the west side.
Yeah, the dentist is the second one in.
Is the second one in, right. So again, we don't need to necessarily decide what should be in and what should be out, but if you think that it's worth exploring to try to clean this up, I think it might be helpful. And the description honestly doesn't make any sense, and having it overlap parcels is also not particularly helpful.
Okay.
So should we take a look and come back with a recommendation?
Sure.
The next one is the Parker River Marine District, which flanks 1A on the south of the Parker River. The original purpose of this district, it was actually originally included in the industrial district. We changed the zoning bless you, to be the Parker River Marine District again back around 2011, 2012, to kind of recognize the fact that you had a couple of businesses down there, actually 3, that had both residential and commercial businesses. But this also crosses boundary parcels, and I think could probably use some cleaning up. If you recall, a few years ago, we had an A&R from Mr. LaRiviere, which created the parcels here, which are 82 and 82A, and a smaller one that doesn't have a number on it. And those are all purely residential now, so it seems like it might make sense to take those out of the Parker River Marine District. They're not doing, it was Arthur Blood's property previously, and there were some marine-related activities, but that's not, none of that's happening anymore.
And then clean up on the other side of 1A.
Yeah, and clean up on the other side as well. We've got Riverfront Marine, but the other 2 parcels, I think, they're privately owned. They're mostly wetland, but I think that side we would need to take a look at a little bit more to see whether it should just be the Riverfront Marine parcel or if there's any benefit. I know there's some construction storage materials being stored on 49. But I wouldn't anticipate that any marine-related activities would be happening either on that or on 47. But we could talk to the property owners.
You mean we'd be, what do you mean talk to the property owners?
To see if they would be anticipating anything in those areas, or we can just take those 2 parcels out, 49 and 47, out of the district.
I'm having a hard time finding 49 in this. I see 47.
47, 49.
It's on the west of 1A.
Yeah, 49, that's the A letter, right?
Oh, okay. No, I got it.
That's what?
This is A letter, I
It's in
think
the
your
wrong side
name
of the
was.
river.
There's a little bond there,
Is that where the goats are?
where they used to be.
Where they used to be?
I believe so. And then I think 47 stories.
I think it's Story too.
I guess that's a question, is how much is that a part of the conversation? Like looking at what the current use is, or some kind of outreach with the property owners, like to,
Right.
as an input in
Right,
a
right,
decision.
right.
Like how does that, what's the best practice there to think about it? That doesn't need to be answered.
Well,
It's an open-ended question,
You
I
know, what
think.
is the rule if a parcel is within two zoning districts, is it controlled by the majority of the parcel, or where any structure's gonna go, or?
That actually is some language that Lisa had cleaned up in our.
My understanding that the building inspector has been interpreting the majority land area prevails. That's not quite the right language, but you get
No,
my point, right? Yeah.
No, I think that.
So for 49, it would be residential ag would be. Not Parker Marine. Parker River Marine.
Let me see what the recommended changes to that language were.
I mean, I guess just to kind of clarify the question I have, when you think about zoning districts for certain uses, I think there should be, it's kind of a lens of what's the best practice for the town's use, right? Like from a public use perspective rather than a private perspective. Rather than just matching what's currently happening, thinking about it in a way that looks to the future about what kinds of uses would you want to potentially attract, what kinds of uses are appropriate for that location and that site, and what would you potentially want to attract as a use. Which doesn't mean consideration of its current use isn't a part of that, but the driving factor would be thinking about what's best for the community.
I mean, are we running into practical problems now with these? I'm not just talking about the Park River District. I guess.
Right.
Right.
Do we have a solution in search of a problem, or do we have a problem in search of a solution?
Right.
You know?
I mean, I think certainly questions come in from property owners whose lots, who they see this, like a number of these parcels we've talked about, I feel like questions have come into the town about, could I do this, or how do I do this? So it is a lack of clarity on the paper, but it's not, the questions have been answered, right? Like we've, worked through like 15 Central, or, it's more like I don't know, be interested by your perspective over many years, but from my perspective, it's sort of like house cleaning, like making it clearer and more straightforward for anyone who's considering what the land use is. It's just kind of cleaning it up to facilitate clarity. But your question's a good one. It's not exceedingly problematic in any way.
No, but
That's-
it is
that's
odd
my
that it
perspective.
overlaps a lot, doesn't
Yeah.
include the whole lot.
It's
so.
just confusing.
Even like on Marsh Ave, before it got subdivided up,
Yeah.
Blood's place there was a square there and then there wasn't anything.
And I think the issue with the Marsh Ave one is that for the parcels that were in both districts, you had different setback requirements, and for the A&Rs, I think it wasn't so much of an issue, but originally they were looking into subdivision, so which setbacks all of a sudden are you using from the street and that kind of stuff, 200 versus 20 or. So just, it seems to me that it's cleaner and more straightforward and less subject to interpretation if there are clear boundaries, but, yes, certainly if there are good reasons for future use or something, then it could make sense to keep things the way they are.
What's the next one?
The next one, actually, I think, that was more something, I don't think we necessarily need to deal with that. This district, the Parker River Residential, has an extremely convoluted parcel description or district description. And
You mean in writing?
in writing,
Okay.
yeah, that was all land that was sold off by Mary Barton. And again, it's almost completely following parcel boundaries, but there's one where it doesn't. So I'm not sure it's something that we need to tackle right now.
Okay.
Next thing on the list is inclusionary zoning, which we just had a great presentation from Ian on, whether the board wants to move forward with that or not. The third thing is energy storage facilities. We did get an advisory from town council. There's been another court case in which energy storage facilities, even those which have minimal connection to a solar generator, are considered a protected use. So it would be, I think, beneficial for us to develop a bylaw. She's provided, we can work with her on that, but there are a lot of concerns about fire hazard and all of that kind of stuff. And we've had at least two different companies expressing interest in creating. One was a very small one, the second one was pretty large.
These would be solar energy.
They're not solar necessarily, they could
Storage.
just be storage, taking energy from the grid and storing it and then putting it back into the grid when needed.
But we're talking electric, we're not talking oil storage.
Right, no, sorry, electric, yeah.
Yeah, they're like giant batteries the size of like AEL storage trailers,
Okay.
or even bigger. They think they're gonna put one in the church with 1,000 sheets of plywood in the roof, off of Hill Street.
Oh, the Hope Church,
Yeah,
interesting.
it's over 1,000 sheets of plywood in the roof. With
Would that
the big roof.
be subject to site plan review or something?
Yeah, I don't know.
That's the new report, so I don't know.
Yeah, I think it
Well,
would be.
yeah, I didn't mean that one.
Right, I think it would be, if it's considered a protected use, it would be site plan review.
Yeah, I mean, just for things like screening and that type of thing. You might want to have some say over that.
You imagine the fire department have a lot to say too.
Yes,
Given
yes, I
the
would think
concern
so.
about fires.
Absolutely.
And
I think I mentioned, I'm sorry,
No, go ahead.
I think I mentioned Moss Landing, which is on Monterey Bay in California, had a big energy storage place battery place which caught fire. And it's very costly cleanup is underway. And I think ironically enough, it was replacing a coal burning plant that was there at one
Oh, is that
time.
right?
And it's an emerging issue, I think is the best way to put it.
My understanding is too, once they catch fire, they just keep burning. So,
Well, that'd be one way to reduce the size of the landfill. If you put it
Holy cow.
So I can't remember what we know now, but is it similar to, is it allowed by right anywhere currently because we don't have a bylaw or mention of it in the table of uses?
so her advisory said these standalone units do qualify for protections under 48 Section 3 of the Dover
Yeah.
Amendment, regardless of the fact that solar energy may constitute a small portion of the energy collected by these units.
wonder if it's the same, if it could be handled the way we were discussing the solar large scale ground mounted solar, which is certain parcels are allowed by right, but anywhere else, special permit.
Right. What council said was the decision would likely be appealed, but the Dover Amendment allows for the town to impose some reasonable regulations on these construction projects to address potential risk to public health, safety, and welfare. As such, the towns, although unable to outright ban the construction of ESFs, can impose certain reasonable requirements special prior to approval, such as adopting site plan review standards applicable to solar energy systems or requiring a special permit. But I'd want to follow up on that one kind of more. We are currently working on drafting reasonable bylaws and regulations, so I think, if the board is in agreement that this is something we should pursue, we can work with council on putting something together.
I can imagine a solar farm or wind turbine farm wanting to have a battery storage place on that same footprint. That way, make it, store it, and release it as needed.
Right.
In particular with turbines, you have a lot of empty space between the towers,
Yeah.
which would be suitable for a battery storage facility, I think.
Okay, we'll follow up on that one. The other one that the board may want to look at some point, but I'm not sure that this is the year to do it since we've got a fair number of other things, is taking a look at our parking bylaw, because that was developed a number of years ago, like 2009, I think, 2010, and really doesn't address current best practices, in terms of stormwater management or sort of space sharing and things like that. So it might be worth starting to take a look at bylaws from other communities to see if they're addressing it or get some guidance on that. So.
Would commercial parking come up? Again, I'm perhaps having a narrow Plum Island perspective, but I know there's a lot of parking done in non-sanctioned areas and non-sanctioned properties on the island. And when I've talked to the building inspector about it, it's like he was saying that he in effect would have to be there to see the money changing hands for parking before he could enforce what is obviously a warm summer weekend business, parking cars on the island.
I think that would be a different issue. This really gets more to, numbers of required parking spaces for different kinds of uses, and, do you put tree islands in and things? So this would really be for new construction in any parking lots or areas,
Okay.
as opposed to, I think, the concerns that you're raising, which are very valid.
Thank you.
Yeah, so it more applies towards new as opposed to existing.
Right,
Those types of issues wouldn't be handled through subdivision regulations or site plan review.
They're not really, I think the parking bylaw kind of sits on top of that. So if we have, say, a site plan review application for a commercial structure, then that would refer back to the parking bylaw as to how many spaces are needed and that kind of stuff, per employee or per, based on square footage or that kind of thing.
It's sort of like the sign bylaw, I guess, like it's a little bit both, right? Yeah. I feel like quantifying the number of spaces for use is something in the bylaw, but the board would have some ability to condition things like tree islands or like other kinds of like site plan stuff if it triggered site plan review.
So, you know, this might be a longer term project, but,
Well, I mean, you know, speaking for myself, I think it's all worthy of further discussion, you know, everything that you have here. I think the big limiting factor would be timing.
well, that's
I
it,
assume we need to get our recommendations to the select board in January,
probably.
for them to then refer it back to us. For the hearing.
Yeah, I think last year we did some real planning board workshopping through December, and then the
Yeah,
initial recommendation was early January.
yeah, because January 1st is gonna be here before you know it.
I
Yeah.
know, that's the issue,
Yeah,
you know, and certainly we don't want to be in a situation where we're either biting off too much and we just can't move it forward, or, you know.
well, it seems to me that the updates, that the zoning, you know, that you've already identified are pretty much ready to go.
They will be, I think, without too much more work, so then, you know, the question is what new things above and beyond that might be a priority.
Yeah, maybe inclusionary zoning, we'll see what Ian comes back with, I guess.
Yeah, I suspect there'll be a lot of discussion about inclusionary zoning, given all the weeds that we were talking about.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's always been one, we sort of get to a certain point with it and start to really start thinking about triggers and payments in lieu versus other kinds of things, or setting up an affordable housing trust, and sort of that's where it keeps stopping.
Yeah.
The other thing on the list, and I had that for maybe farther down the road, but apparently a question has come up from Verizon again about the DPW site, is whether the board wants to try to move forward again with expanding the wireless tower district.
I don't like that site. We went over that, you and I Martha had a lot of discussions about that a few years ago, I remember. I just don't think that site lends itself to it. It's too small.
It's tough.
Yeah.
It's tough.
And in fairness to the neighbors too, I mean, you'd have people that literally would be, their property would be in the shadow of the tower. And,
Yeah.
you know, in fact, we were talking about this at a recent meeting, about how it's, the last time we looked at this, remember Woody? I think you pointed out that it was like 2020 was the last time we had a consultant look at this, and
Well, that-
technological advances.
Right, and that's exactly part of what we discussed with town council, was if, if there was any interest in moving forward with this, it would probably make sense to bring David Maxton back in, have him do, another coverage analysis and see if the recommendations are the same as they were before.
I mean, the DPW property might be, in my view, might be fine for a small, what do they call it, small
It's
cell?
a small cell.
Yeah, facility, but putting up a 100-foot pole there, I couldn't support that.
No,
Yeah, we did talk about this in July at our last workshop, and that certainly
we had a lot of
aligns with the need.
kickback on the train. Leisure field too, so.
Yeah.
I mean, the school committee seemed open to pursuing it once all the questions that got raised were answered.
Well, they just wanted it at the parcel where their septic system is.
They were more.
Yeah, they didn't want it in the main campus, so they were getting too much pushback at the time, I think.
But I think they.
Or anticipating pushback.
Right, I think they did express some openness to pursuing that if all the questions that were raised about, health and everything else could be addressed.
And
Yeah.
I do think the community would benefit from a clear analysis of the need, like a very clear, updating that study and really working through the research on it to demonstrate why there are problems. To your earlier question, like what are we trying to solve here?
Right.
And that's kind of the upfront messaging that I think the last time we worked on this, we decided we needed to do more of.
Right, no, absolutely. Yeah, so it might be, it might be worth seeing if there was some way of bringing David Maxon back in.
You're gonna
to
need some
do
money to
that.
do it.
Yeah, we'd need some funding for that. So that was my list.
Thank you. It's a lot.
You've been busy in your retirement,
In my
frankly.
retirement.
Yeah, we could not be doing this without Martha supporting this drive.
It's part-time.
And even this feels like a lot
Yeah.
to, how to prioritize. I'm not sure how we can move all this forward in the time we have.
Yeah, no, I know, that's the next, how does it get prioritized and how does it get bundled in a way that makes sense?
Yeah, I mean, do you want to do all the required, just looking at your recodification phase two, you want to, I mean, my inclination would be to just make that one article. And simply explain to town meeting that we're just updating this and getting rid of some inconsistencies. I suppose with the exception of the ground-mounted solar.
Yeah, I mean, that's the big one that stands out as kind of a major change. The rest of them are
Yeah, I mean, just clarifying language.
yeah, and inserting the recommended language that Lisa had given us previously. I did find her recommended language regarding lots in 2 districts, which says where a district boundary divides an existing lot and the major portion of said lot is in the less restricted district, the regulation relating to the latter district may extend as well to such portion of said lot as is not more than 20 feet within the more restricted district.
Well, a lawyer drafted that one.
So,
Is that easier than what we have now?
yeah, right
Clearer than what we have.
Yeah, I think right now we actually don't have any language regarding that, which is
Ah.
why she's recommended that we add some.
Which article is that in?
It's in Article 2.
Read it again.
Words.
Oh, yeah, you've got that listed.
Right. So it says where a district boundary divides an existing lot and the major portion of said lot is in the less restricted district, the regulations relating to the latter district may extend as well to such portion of said lot as is not more than 20 feet within the more restricted district.
Okay, the latter district being the least restricted district.
And what's the, how do you
I'm
determine
sure it
what's
makes
more or
sense,
less
I just need it.
restrictive?
Well, I think
And
it-
why 20 feet and not 30 feet?
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I think the restrictions really, well, I guess it would be both use restriction and dimensional restrictions requirements. So it could be that one is more restricted in terms of use, but less restricted in terms of dimensional.
Yeah.
So this may be something to talk
It's
to her when we
tricky,
meet with her
yeah,
next
it's
week.
tricky.
Also get Peter's take on how he would interpret this.
Right. Let's write something that's English that people can easily understand.
How many years ago was it that there was a push for clearly understandable English for the common person versus, or at least providing a translation of the lordly language?
Yeah,
But that-
I know, a lot
that's an
of,
old,
yeah. A lot of zoning bylaws more recently have added like pictures of things to go along with complicated verbiage.
And even things
Graphic
like
bylaws.
building height, the little diagrams for different types of roofs.
There's, for some reason, people who draft these things, I include myself in this, don't like to use periods. You know, I mean, a short declarative sentence added with another short declarative sentence.
Right, make that sentence as long as you
Yeah.
can with
Yeah.
Trying to
no
cover
Make
everything,
it, yeah.
every
Right,
angle.
it's kind of like a Henry James paragraph, which is all one sentence. But I mean, that sort of goes, I guess, to my feeling that it might be good to clarify the boundaries of some of these districts so that it doesn't even get to be an issue.
No,
Follows the lot lines.
Yeah, follows the lot lines, and you just don't even have to deal with it, either dimensionally or use-wise.
well, I think, again, I think I said this earlier, but if you got the time, all of this is worth at least presenting to the board, you know, to make it, you know, for the whole board to make a determination
Yeah.
whether we want to go forward with
Yeah.
this or
Yeah.
with that. Because I don't think you're gonna get it all in for the, you know.
No, I don't think so either.
For 2026.
No, I think that would be very unlikely, which is why, you know, I wanted to kind of talk about it today and get a sense of, you know, are there any clear priorities, or yes, let's move forward and then see what we can accomplish, what seems to make sense within the time we have.
So I wonder, just kind of thinking forward, I know workshops like this are hard to schedule and add another meeting onto the regular meetings you all are doing, so I just would sort of be open to figuring out if we might be able to reserve time on regular meetings for the next chunk, like our, you know, a month from now would be November 5th. Like, should we bring Martha back November 5th and get updates, or do we want to schedule, like, is this, I mean, we only have a partial,
I won't be here on November 5th, just to
Turnout.
let you know.
okay. Well, that's why we need to set the calendar really, because like you said, it's gonna be January before we know it.
Yeah, because we're already talking the second meeting in November, so at
Yeah.
the earliest.
Right.
To have Martha back, if we go with the regular meetings.
Right,
Right, and then the other question is, getting back to the table of use regulations and SPGA, you know, seeing if anybody would be interested in particular in participating in a workshop on that, which would be separate.
right.
Well, it was my impression you pretty much had that in hand.
Not the table of use regulations. Because I think, you know, we talked about potentially having discussion with, you know, at least one, with a ZBA member like Eric, potentially a select board member, a couple of planning board members, and a building commissioner. We've asked him to review it because I think it would be very helpful to get his input on, you know, are there any particular things in the table that are unclear that give him heartburn every time, you know, somebody comes in and says, can I do this? You know, and there has been discussion about, you know, taking another look at who the special permit granting authority is for different uses.
Well, I volunteered to participate.
That would be great. Thank you.
Do you wanna try to set a time to come back with the board? Or do you want to set a time for Martha to come back?
Yeah, no, I'm open to, we're gonna be under a tight schedule here before we know it, so any suggestions from you, Martha, would be great. Because you're gonna have to confer with town council on some things.
Yeah, we're meeting with her next Thursday, and the hope then is we still have, I think, 3 articles to go through where there are questions that we haven't talked through yet. And then as I've gone through the ones that we have discussed, I have sort of new questions or need some clarification.
Yep.
I mean, would the next get-together, whatever you want to call it, I mean, would we be in a position to look at actual proposed town meeting articles? Or, and I'm not making myself
No,
very
no,
clear.
no, I know exactly what you're asking. I think, and my hope would be that at least there might be a, a comprehensive draft of everything.
That's what I was trying to say.
Yes. It might not be broken down into the exact articles, but at least there would be a document.
Would
for
have the
everybody to-
language, for example, for
Would have the
ground mounted
language
solar.
and have the, bold underlines with the additions and new language and the strikeouts and be able to go through all of that.
Because I think without that, we're just gonna have another discussion similar to what we're having this morning.
Right, right. I mean, today was really, the idea was just to kind of say, okay, this is where we are. This is the general outline of what's happening, but the next step would be to have something concrete to take a look at.
Yeah.
Well, certainly we have a standing agenda item for our regular meeting, so we can discuss it.
Well, you could do that, yeah. I mean, just
Update.
put, zoning bylaw amendment updates, and
Right.
put that on the agenda.
Yep.
And if we don't,
If we've got something to talk about, we will.
yeah, we will. If we don't, we
Whatever.
don't. Yeah. I mean, ZBA, for example, has the Cricket Lane on all of their agendas. I can't remember the last time they actually got a report on it. And that's not a criticism.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
just, they left the door open for exactly what you're suggesting, Steve.
No, and I know with conservation, like Carrie, they leave everything on there, even though we pass it by every 2 weeks, but. So,
Yeah, that makes sense, because then at least it's on there to be discussed. I mean,
Right.
it could be handled in the planner's report, but as a standing item, I think that makes sense, especially as we're getting closer and closer to town meeting.
yeah.
Yeah, so probably, I mean, the 15th is next week. We're doing this today, so we won't need that. The 5th, I know, is the next regularly scheduled, and then it would be the 19th. So probably the 19th might be kind of what we'd shoot for, I think, relative to the work we need to do with Lisa and potentially the little working group about certain things.
Right, I mean, hopefully we could, I'm quite sure when, but it would be nice to get the working group together
Between now and then.
between now and then.
Yeah, well, that's
That would be
7 weeks. Right?
Yeah, I'm just looking at my schedule. I might be.
6 weeks.
I might be the cog in the wheel, or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, we need to just work backwards from what our deadlines are and
Right.
just make it happen, I guess. Okay.
Well, this is great. Thank you for your patience in sitting through all of that.
This is very helpful.
All right. I don't think there was any, does anyone have the agenda in front of me?
I didn't bring a copy.
No.
Meant
Let's see if Woody wants a motion.
Yeah.
Would you like a
I
motion
think we can
to?
just.
Motion to adjourn
I'll
workshop,
I'll move to adjourn.
I'll second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, very good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Martha.
Well, thank you guys.